Hi guys, a very good evening to you all. I hope you're all doing well. I'm Pavitra here from Naturalist Foundation. So, since the COVID-19 pandemic began, we've all been confined to our homes, and the lockdown is actually stressing us out, some of us out, yes. But during this period, at the same time, we're seeing the animals, the wildlife, coming back to places, coming back to the lands, visiting the lands which was theirs once. Like we're seeing the bluebills taking to the streets in Chandigarh, then 1.5 lakh flamingos congregated in Navi Mumbai. Then the activity of leopards in RA has increased, and at the same time, we're seeing that as most of us are not going out of the house through vehicles and not using vehicles, the vehicular pollution has gone down. Industries are not working, industrial pollution has gone down, and the air pollution has reduced. So we're seeing many of us are seeing clearer sky in metropolitan cities like Mumbai for the first time. And we are also able to see glimmering, the stars glimmering at night. Beautiful sight. Some of us might be seeing it for the first time. So we say that it took us a pandemic to realize the beauty of nature. Now that we are relishing the beauty of nature, we are enjoying it. And but at the same time, we need to see that we need to take into account that this lifestyle that we are leading now is a very sustainable lifestyle, and that it should be continued even after the pandemic, even after the lockdown ends. Besides, we also need to realize that climate change has never taken a backseat. Even though we might think that the nature is recuperating, climate change never took a backseat. So today, I think this is the right time, the best time to have all of you on board, and of course, Hita Lakni on board, who is going to be talking about climate change, global warming, the role of youth in tackling the climate crisis, and of course, our Mother Earth. So I'll be inviting her over. Yeah, till then, if you have any questions which you have in mind to ask her, then you can just put it down in the comments below. We'll try and address it at the end of the session. So, yes. Hi, Hita.
Hi Pavitra, how are you?
I'm fine, I'm fine. How are you doing?
Great.
How's your day?
Good, not bad.
So,
Days are
first of all,
moving on.
yeah, yes, exactly. So, first of all, I'd like to, start off this session by asking you to share your story and the incredible work you've done. Why did you choose where did the inspiration come from for you to become a fierce environmental activist?
Well, so my story is quite simple. It wasn't a light bulb moment that made me say, okay, this is what I want to do. I've always been, ever since I was a child, I liked the environment, I liked nature, I rescued a few strays on and off.
Oh,
So I'd always liked being with animals, being out in nature. And I think it was just the natural thing for me to want to study more about the environment, which is why I researched and I realized that I could actually do a degree in environmental studies, and that's
wow.
what I decided to do for my master's. And after that, I slowly got into the line of the international negotiations, met young people there, understood how the negotiation process works. And then there was no going back at all. I just realized that there was such a huge gap between
Definitely.
the world of the negotiations, what happens there, versus what's going on here back home in our country. That people are not aware of the process, and ultimately all of that affects our lives. And that's when I decided that I have to work towards bridging this gap that we have, and there was no going back. So it was just something that I always liked right from a young age, and it slowly got streamlined into something
So
more.
it's like a childhood dream, kind of.
Actually, it was. So ever since I was maybe 12 or 13, if someone asked me, Ita, what do you want to be when you grow up? I said I want to be an environmentalist.
Oh,
And
wow.
I'm kind of happy to say that I can actually at least still working every single day to get there, but at least I'm doing what I thought I will be since I was a child. So
Great, awesome. And you've attended many high-profile conferences, right? Like the COP, the COY. So can you share some of your best experiences which you had during these conferences?
I think the best experiences was just meeting so many young people from around the world. It made me realize that the first time I met a group of young people where I was invited, and they spent after hours, the evening hours post dinner, to sit back and decide on, like, work on their projects and what they wanted to do. And these were young people right from the ages of, I think, maybe 15, 16 onwards, so like teenagers until, and I think I was one of the oldest in that group. I was probably around 23, 24 at that time. And so they were all 16, 17, 18-year-olds, and they worked post dinner hours at 8, 9, 10 in the night until late, you know, just deciding on what their project was going to be, how they were going to do it, talking amongst themselves. They had a very clear agenda planned, and they had talking points, and they gave each other turns to talk. And that was the first time I was part of such a group where young people were so active and were so, not just active, but also so proactive and taking the charge of their lives. Usually what I'd seen was that the young people always just did what their adults told them to do. And all throughout, like, if you're a teenager, no one's really going to sit and listen to what you're saying. And my experience as during my teenagers with friends was not of this kind of work. And that was what really opened my eyes and said, if young people around the world are doing this, why can't we do this in India? Why can't Indian, youth sit together and brainstorm like this on very productive topics rather than whiling away, laughing, giggling, talking with friends?
Absolutely.
So I think my learnings were just learning from other young people. And then, of course, learning how the international processes work, learning how complex the entire negotiation bit is, how slow it is, how tedious it is, how boring it can become. But despite all of that, how important it is for our lives. Like, while you and I sitting home might not even realize how, for example, the Paris Agreement was negotiated, that agreement affects all our lives all across the world. And so I think, like, it was a two-way sort of learning stream, and I think those are things that it's forever, every day it's a learning process.
Awesome. It's just a personal question. Like, what exactly is the Paris Agreement about? Can you elaborate?
Sure. So the UN body that works on climate change is known as the UNFCCC, that is the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. And within the UNFCCC, countries, also known as parties, they come together and they negotiate how internationally they will work towards combating climate change. So back in 2015, the countries got together and there was an agreement that was signed, and because the conference took place in Paris in 2015, it was known as the Paris Agreement. This agreement is extremely historical because number one, it had 197 parties or countries, 197 countries that signed to it and who are party to it. Basically 197 countries agreed to every single word in a text. And just to think about it in context, imagine we're 5 people in a room and making, picking a favorite color or a color for a group. And the number of back and forth that's going to go just to pick one color, and compare that to a text which is pages and pages long, where every single word you need to agree on, whether it's a whether it's a full stop, whether it's a should or a shall or a will or a would. So it's historic in that sense that 197 countries agreed to a certain text, while the Paris Agreement talks about limiting global temperature rise to less than 2 degrees centigrade. So 2 degrees is again from pre-industrial times. So since we started industrialization, the temperature of our Earth globally was a certain temperature, and the global average temperature should not increase for more than 2 degrees. And that's what the Paris Agreement aims to do. Again, this agreement is not legally binding. It is, it's not it's a mix of a bottom up and a top down approach. So it's not, which is why again it was adopted, and why it was historic is that it's a good mix of a bottom up approach as well as a top down approach. So it's not something that is forced upon countries. It's not legally binding, which means that if the country does not do what they're saying they will do, there's still no legal action to it, which is the drawback. But it still gives a lot of leeway for people to, or for countries to still figure out how they want to achieve their international goals for climate change in relation to their country's perspective as well.
Oh, okay, got it. So, can you put into perspective how the conversation of climate change and global warming, is doing rounds in the international scale?
Well, it is clearly like it is picking up. We're clearly seeing people talk about it more and more every single day. Internationally at the United Nations, the Secretary General recently mentioned that while we are all dealing with COVID and while we want to get back and restart our economies, we should definitely do that in a more climate friendly way, which means we don't go back to the world that we had or that we were used to all this while 3 months ago. And we move towards a world which is a lot more greener, a lot more sustainable, a lot more circular in that matter. So clearly climate is the hot topic internationally. All we need to do is ensure that countries are actually doing what they're saying, so that it just doesn't become all talk and no action.
No action.
But we need to ensure that, no matter what we talk, we still need to ensure that there is some sort of action, very concrete action taken. And this action needs to be fast. We can't wait for another 5 years to begin taking action. We don't have the time anymore.
Definitely. And how do you think the youth can help in such policy making decisions and step up for the challenge? What would be the contribution of the youth in such cases?
It depends from young person to person what your interests are, what your likes are, what kind of topics you're interested in. Number one, read and get yourself, learn what is happening. Learn about the international processes, learn about what your country is doing when it comes to climate change, or learn about what your local government is doing when it comes to the environment or climate change. So number one, make yourself equipped with knowledge. Because only if you know what's happening can you recommend solutions to something. And the second bit is, I think while it's a little more difficult in India to easily approach our policy makers, our decision makers, some parts of the world it's a lot more easier to approach them. They have email IDs that are regularly checked, or they have phone numbers that you could call and talk to their offices. It's slightly difficult in India to get past that, but still, now with social media, it's still generating a lot of momentum where you can tag someone in a tweet, or you can send them a message, and you can, always. But again, the important thing is that don't be afraid. You don't need to know everything to be able to suggest a policy or even a tweak in something. You need not be an expert in everything that it comes to environment and climate change. And as a young person, I think we come with a lot of fresh perspectives. So young people can definitely help in something that, or be a little more energetic, be a little more proactive, and bring bring a new light to even existing sort of decision makings. So go ahead and just take the leap and tell them. And well, there's a high chance they might not listen to you, but there's also an odd chance that they might. So why not, just take the leap of faith and see what happens. And if not, just try again and try again and try again. So there's no harm in, always reaching out to people.
Absolutely, I agree with you. And youth being the next generation, they are the ones who should lead the way. They shouldn't be they shouldn't be scared of actually putting forward their opinions, because their opinions hold really, really important in the future.
Definitely. It is our future, and we should be the ones shaping it. I don't think we should leave our future in somebody else's hands. So that's spot on.
Definitely. So coming to India's India's current state of India, how far do you think India has been successful in tackling against the climate crisis?
Well, India is actually, in terms of the UN climate change, that's the UNFCCC, After the Paris Agreement, countries were asked to submit something known as an NDC, or a nationally determined contribution, which means that every country decides for themselves what they want to do nationally in terms of climate change, whether it's adaptation, mitigation, a mix of all strategies. Basically, countries decide what they're going to do for themselves. No one's telling them from outside that this is what you should do. So it's a very inclusive approach. India's NDC, or nationally determined contribution, the first draft that it submitted is actually not that bad, and it harps a lot on solar and on green energy. It also mentions, I was just noting down the numbers because I think it says that we have, by 2030, India plans to have 40% of its power capacity moving to solar.
Okay.
Which is, so moving to non-fossil fuel based. So it's basically a greener form of energy. So by 2030, 40% of India's power should be non-fossil fuel based, which is great for a country in the size of India, with the population of India. I think it's a great move. But again, we need to realize that everything is not, it doesn't end at energy. There's a lot more.
That's true.
And India lacks the mention of education of young people. It lacks mention of how young people can get involved in the process. So while we do have a decent NDC, we are still lacking in terms of a lot of inclusion of young people within the NDCs. And I'm not sure how many young people were part of the NDC framing process. So how many actually helped frame this document for the country. So that's where there's a lot of chance for us to improve in terms of climate change. Again, in the international context of the UNFCCC, every country's NDC was sort of measured whether it's in line with the Paris Agreement or not. And India's NDC, with its economic status and with its population, it is well in line with the Paris Agreement actually. So if India followed its NDCs completely, the first draft that it has said it will do, we should be on a trajectory of a 2-degree temperature rise world, which is more or less in line with the Paris Agreement. But again, the Paris Agreement doesn't work with just one country, right? So it's 197 countries, India is just one of the 197. And if all the 197 countries were equally or more ambitious, only then will we achieve what the Paris Agreement was meant to achieve. And that clearly is not happening at the moment. There are some countries which are bigger emitters, which are more economic superpowers, whose NDCs are not as ambitious. Again, I'm not saying India has the perfect NDC. There's a lot that we can do in terms of ambition, in terms of doing a lot more, because yes, we're not an economic superpower. Yes, we're transitioning from a developing to a developed country. And yes, we have a lot of other issues to look after, like poverty, jobs. And now with the COVID crisis, these issues have just multiplied exponentially. But I think that still doesn't, I think that that's not an excuse to not work on climate change. Because in today's time, if we don't incorporate, climate-friendly way of thinking in every single policy that we make, or in every single business that we start, within a few years, we're going to brace the brunt of climate change, and it's going to hit us hard in the face. And we don't even want to imagine what that's going to be like. So I think it's high time that we start thinking that while we do have a decent NDC, it doesn't end at that, and I think that's just the starting point. And it's definitely just the first step in the right direction. We definitely need to aim for a lot more as a country, and maybe be an inspiration for other countries. Like India can lead, inspire other BRICS nations. BRICS is Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, and India can be a leader within the group of the BRICS nations, and say that if we can do it, countries with similar status, with similar economic conditions, y'all can step up your ambition as well. So I don't think we should wait for somebody else to take the first step, rather go and take it ourselves.
So what I feel is that the children from a very young level, they should be the portion, their syllabus should include something about climate change, and they should be made aware of the topic of environment. It shouldn't be, it should become a compulsory subject instead of fine if it's not there. it should become compulsory, and people like the young children are the ones who should know the gravity of the situation. It should become compulsory. Especially I've seen many, like during my, like when I was studying, I really didn't have much of environmental studies which young students are having now, and that is something that is actually improving in India, I feel.
Right,
Definitely.
and that is definitely picking up, and that was actually the first thing that I saw when I started going to these international negotiations while I did a master's in environmental studies. So I had the knowledge with me, but I realized that we don't have this in our country back home, and the kids of today going to school are not equipped with enough knowledge to face the climate crisis. Forget the capacity, but they don't even have the knowledge to understand what their future is going to even look like. And which is why after going to a few negotiations, I was with a friend of mine at one of these negotiations, and we've been friends since schools. And she's, of course, she's a psychologist. She did not she is not an environment person. And the difference in our perspectives made me realize that while someone who I've been friends with since childhood, who's passionate about the environment, reads up, knows about climate change, still did not know a lot of things that I took for granted just because I had already a degree in the field. And sometimes you take knowledge for granted. You don't realize that all these facts are actually new for certain people. It made me realize that, there's a lot to do back in our country, which made me want to work with school children. And I started my own sort of program called Green Warriors,
Oh,
which is
great.
educating young kids on climate change, on the international process. Basically, just bringing the climate science and the negotiations down for them so that they can understand what happens and then take some action and work towards it.
Definitely. I
So
so
clearly,
appreciate
like
that.
education and building capacity of school kids and young kids of today is definitely the need of the hour, especially in countries like ours.
Yes, yes. And so we see that many youngsters have took it upon their hands, like Greta Thunberg. Then you have Aman Sharma from Delhi, who are skipping schools, who are skipping classes, and they're protesting on streets. So they are not even old enough to vote, but they are able to. They want a change. They are desperate for a change. They are desperate to change the minds of the government, like who are proceeding towards development, and no sustainability. So, how far do you think the governments are like? Do you think the government is really neglecting this issue, even if the youngsters are protesting?
Um, that's a very interesting question, and I think like the names that you've picked up are like they're amazing people. I've had the opportunity to meet both of them. Actually, Aman is a friend now,
Wow.
and Greta and I we met of course with a few other young people back at COP24 in 2018 in Poland.
Oh, great.
That's where she sort of rose to fame after her speech at the UN
Mm-hmm.
there.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that the work that the kids of today, like I don't even know whether to call them kids, but like the youth of today are doing, I think that's amazing, and that's definitely brought the climate conversation to the dinner table. Now people, at least across the world, people like you and me are aware that there's something known as climate change. They're aware of school strikes. They're aware of these kids. They might not know names, but they'll still go like, oh yeah, there was this group of kids who I saw, marching somewhere and talking about climate change. I had a friend of mine who I was talking to recently, and she said, oh, I was in somewhere in Europe a few months ago. And she said, I was just walking past and they went out sightseeing and they did not realize it was a Friday and they got stuck because there were
Ah, so
500 or
Fridays for
1,000 or I don't
futures.
know how many millions of kids were on the streets. And they said, you know, so these are actually becoming a dinner table conversation now. So which is, I think, a great leap in climate change action already. That it has definitely created awareness across the world, and it's gone from almost like down here to like shot up incredibly. But when it comes to countries taking action, again, while there are a lot of countries who do acknowledge them and do sort of understand that climate change is a big deal and that young people's voices do matter and that they should be acting. And I'm not saying that countries don't. A lot of countries are acting on this.
Mm-hmm.
There are still, I still think that there's not enough action globally. There's still a lot of talk. but there's not enough action, and that's what we need to change. We really don't have the time to just keep talking anymore. At country level, like, talking is good, but it's not enough. And we don't need, we don't want to listen to you talking. We want to see you taking concrete action. It's fine if you don't give a long speech on how climate change is or climate action is important, but if you go and make 5 policy changes, we'll be more happier that way.
Definitely.
So there is a lot of work to be done, but it's definitely kickstarted the conversation in the right direction, and I think it's taking up in the right way. So I think that's
Great.
yeah.
Yes, actually, the Fridays for Future movement was really instrumental in gathering a lot of young people, even from the school level, the college level, everyone, even all people from all generations, and they all united towards a common cause. Like we all were
Right.
protesting. That Friday was the day which everyone was uniting and putting forward their views about how the government should take into account the
Right.
some changes that it should do actually. So and finally, I would like to come to the last question before we open up to the viewer questions. So I would like to know your views about whether India is failing to keep promises on its environmental front, especially when you consider the recent draft EIA notifications and the Debang Italian hydro project.
Yeah, I mean, those are, I mean, definitely. There is no two ways about it. What we're doing is definitely not the right way, especially in the times of COVID. When we see that clearly we're in this situation, the world is locked down in their homes, economy has almost come to a standstill. It is only because we have forgotten to respect nature. We have mistreated our environment, our natural world, and we have gone beyond our boundaries of nature and respecting our natural world. Clearly, I don't think this is even a matter of thinking whether it's right or wrong, because we can see that it's clearly not okay. Opening up pristine forest lands, which is actually a biodiversity hotspot, for construction of power projects, whether it's hydropower or any other projects for that matter, is not okay. We need to have our forests left untouched. We need to ensure that we cannot progress like we did. Like I said, who would have thought 3 months ago that the world would be in a standstill, that we would actually be in this position that we are today? We were always told that there's no way that the economy can stop. If you have to transition, it has to be economically viable. And, we're told all sorts of things about why it's not easy to transition that quick to a greener economy or to a circular economy. But this is the first time we have the chance. We have come to a pause, and we're going to restart. And we should use this opportunity very wisely, and we should not go back to square one. We're not going to reverse back, because we're definitely going to go back to a world that we don't want to see. It's going to be an uninhabitable world, not just for other species, not just for wildlife, but in a few years for humans and for us ourselves. So it's not just a matter of my survival or a survival of my kids. It's definitely a more serious matter of survival of the human species in general. So tampering with biodiverse hotspots, tampering with nature, tampering with our natural forests, basically things which are so naturally, so worklessly, our forests bring down carbon from the atmosphere. They regulate our weather patterns, they regulate our water, they're reservoirs for water, for our rivers, for groundwater. And by tampering with all of that, I don't think we're going to move towards a world that is in any way more sustainable, any way more greener, or even circular in that matter. We need to have an economy that is circular, that is not, it's not a linear economy. You don't just consume and throw. You have to ensure that it goes back into the system, because we cannot keep creating more waste. Our world, our earth does not have the space for more of our junk, and we need to realize that sooner than later. So I mean, all said and done, I think no matter what we're saying as a country, like I said, we're talking a lot globally and also as a country, but we're not acting enough. And we need to make sure that our actions and our words actually match, because, like the phrase says, action speaks louder than words. I could go on and say I have a zero waste lifestyle, for example. But if I go out, buy a bag of chips, throw it in the bin, it's not a zero waste lifestyle. So I
Right.
need to ensure that, if I say something, I'm actually acting on it. So I
Definitely.
think that's
And
where we need to realize.
and this not only applies to these two projects, and there are many other projects which are being uh, which are coming up during this lockdown period. Like you have this Hubali Ankola rail project, and then there's another project in Assam. All of these are meant to destroy one of the most pristine habitats. And I don't like this. Actually, I don't understand the fact behind destroying lands which are home to six variations of the Indian golden cat, and the tigers which are found in the highest of altitudes, and many other wildlife which are endemic to it, and many of them are not even discovered. So you don't know about that place, how biodiverse it is, and you just taking it for granted. And it is also a place for a tribal community. That all should be taken into account before you come up with these projects. You're very true. I totally agree with whatever you said. Definitely. And so now that we're done with my questions, I would like to open up the questions to our viewers. And before that, I would like to ask a question which was in response to our Instagram story. So that isn't nuclear energy a better alternative than other energy sources which are eating up the habitat?
That's a very interesting question, and I've actually had this conversation back and forth for a while with some people. Um, Nuclear is definitely better in terms of the amount of energy it generates for versus fossil fuel. But again, there are two sides to the same coin. So while it does generate a lot more energy for the same amount of fuel, for example, or the same quantity of fuel, it definitely has a lot more implications. And it has implications with its radioactiveness. So we need to make sure that while some could say that it's greener in that sense, we need to ensure that it's holistically green and not just green in terms of fuel
True, very
consumption.
true.
So it's a constant debate whether nuclear is better or whether something else is better, because of course renewable takes a lot more time to get the same amount of energy, for example solar or wind, versus that much of fossil fuel versus that much of nuclear. But I think there's a whole humanitarian aspect to all of this, so we should definitely think a lot more holistically and not just take decisions based on one side of the story. So yeah,
Definitely.
that's what I
And
feel.
also events like Chernobyl actually left an etching, a wound on us, kind of. So I don't think it would be really wise to go on with the nuclear energy, because it actually poses a threat. It might be a greener way, but yes, holistically greener should be what we are looking for. True.
Yeah.
So now are the viewers to ask any questions to her. So you can just put it down in the comments below, and we'll try and take it up.
Sure.
So
But this was it's been a great conversation, Pavitra, and I think
same here.
clearly like we're definitely like we need to realize the ecosystem services that nature gives us, and it's not just about it's not just about the animals that live in the forest. Of course, it is about the animals, but there's a lot more, and the whole holisticness and thinking of it in a very selfish manner. Like the forest literally give us our clean air, they give us our water, and they give us soil to grow our food in. So just being very selfish from my point of view, we need nature and we need our natural forests. And
Definitely.
this is not even thinking about the entire ecosystem services it gives us, about the animals, the little life forms it has, right from the tiny little microorganisms to our big tiger or lion, or the big cats that we so love to watch. And I think we also need to realize that it's not just our earth. We share this
We
world,
share,
we share this
yes.
planet with a lot of different life forms. We don't own it, and we're really like guests on this planet. We've come only a few years ago, a few million years ago, but in
Definitely.
terms of the geological scale, we're very, very new. And I don't think it gives us a right to treat this planet like it's our own property and to do what we want with it.
Totally
So,
agree. Totally agree. And actually, we should think that we are a part of nature, and we are not at the top of the food chain. It's something that is a part of us. And if we
For
lose a part
sure.
of us, it's definitely going to hurt us.
Definitely, for sure.
So there's this PC Paloma who is saying, as Naomi Klein said, it's not only by voting well, we need to understand the power we have and keep pressurizing leaders for ambition. Yes, very true, very true, PC Paloma. And
Paloma is a very fierce climate activist from Brazil, a friend and colleague of mine. Yeah, that's a lady from the Amazon you'd not want to fool with.
oh, but what she said is incredibly true.
For sure, and I
Yes.
think Naomi Klein can point things straight up sometimes.
So we have a question for you. What really is sustainable way of living?
Oh, that's a very interesting question. I don't think there's a single black or white answer for this. Um, I think what we need to do as individuals is just to be mindful of every single thing that we're doing, whether it's as simple as putting on the fan or the air conditioner or the light in our house and just like leave that running. We've been told since childhood, put off the lights and fans when you leave the room. But what exactly does that mean? It just means to be a little more mindful that if we don't need something, don't use it or don't leave it running in the background.
Yes.
And this is true for every single thing. Like we're using resources 24/7 in every single part of our of our day, and whether it is the water that we use to wash our hands, or whether it is the food we eat, or whether it's something that we go out and we do, I think we just need to be mindful about how much we need and how much we don't. And again, this comes down to the entire mindset of what we're sort of being projected with every single day. We have advertisements, marketing that says we need a newer I don't know, we need a newer phone, or we need a better car, or we need a better, you just need newer clothes, or faster fashion, or whatever that looks, or whatever that means. And I think we need to realize that we don't necessarily need all of these things. We probably do need a few things in life for sure. Oops, sorry. Yeah, but we don't definitely need newer versions of things that we own. And we just need to be more mindful, and we do need to realize that every single thing that we do, I go and buy a new t-shirt from the market, is going to have an impact on the resources. For example, the cotton that is used to grow in it, the amount of water that is used in that field, the amount of water that is used to process that cotton, and again the transportation right from where the t-shirt is produced from the factory to my store where I go and buy it. So every single action of ours has an implication. So we just need to be more mindful and decide what is the best for us.
Another question: is our planet really recovering with this COVID-19? Like ozone is really recovering now?
Um, well, we can clearly see that the planet is definitely breathing, and it's definitely taking. It's definitely. I don't know whether it's recovering. It's too soon to say that, but it's definitely taking a pause, and it's a very nice pause for the planet as well, where our skies have cleared up, our air is a lot more breathable. We're seeing blue skies after I don't know how many months or years. We're definitely seeing more and more, we're hearing more and more birds. We're definitely seeing videos of how animals are coming down into cities, some of them fake, some of them not, some of them quite true. But it just shows us that, if you leave nature untouched, it's definitely the world is going to come back. And it's going to come back and flourish. So we just need to realize that that we need to realize our boundaries and respect the boundaries of nature also, and make sure that we don't abuse nature once again when we go back into our
Definitely,
industrialized world.
definitely. And this was a great time for us to stop, stare, and enjoy nature. It took us a pandemic to realize that we need to enjoy nature. We need to we just started looking at nature's beauty. Now is during this time we just came to know that some of us might have come to know that yes, the tree which is next to which I can see from my balcony is visited every day by a golden oriole. Wow, like that yellow bird. So this was the time when
Exactly.
we all came to know that yes, there is something which is around around in my backyard, which I can see, which is actually wildlife. Yes.
For sure, definitely. And these are things that we didn't realize previously because we were just too busy in our lives, or
Busy,
because
yes.
there was so much noise around us that we didn't hear the birds chirping every morning. And I mean, we're definitely seeing this, and I think, at least I am realizing it, that I want to go out in nature, and being stuck in a house in Bombay is the worst thing that I could feel like right now. I want to go out for a walk by the sea, or just go out to the forest, and just it. I mean, I have my social distance, but I just want to be out in nature. And, this is what has made me realize that it's not a luxury, it is a necessity. And our natural world is
Definitely.
necessary for our daily lives. And it's not something that we can get 5 days in a year and come back and say, oh, it was such a nice holiday. So,
Definitely, definitely. I
yeah.
totally agree. And another question, what can Indian youth do now to actively participate in international climate negotiations through our governments?
Again, a very interesting question. Well, I think young people in India should just, I think what we're lacking is, while we now have a lot of citizens movements, and a lot of people are out there protesting, whether it's Fridays for Future, whether it's young people for other causes, like the Dibang, or like the RA project in Bombay. So we've had, people, especially younger now, getting more and more active in terms of voicing their concerns. I think we also need to realize that we should suggest concrete solutions. So, I mean, concrete alternatives that we can suggest on how young people can either be more involved in the process, or from the young person's point of view, how the process should be. So I think what is lacking is to come up with concrete solutions, and then submit that and saying that here, while we're saying 1, 2, 3 should not be done, we're not stopping at that. We're giving XYZ as solutions or options of what can be done in place of 1, 2, 3. So I think we need to start thinking a little more, and of course that doesn't mean we should stop voicing our concerns. We continue doing that, but we should also start thinking about more concrete solutions that can help, and then tell the government that here we have the solutions in front of us. All you have to do is implement them now.
Implement, yes, definitely, definitely. And how do you handle the climate crisis deniers? Please advise on how to respond to them.
That's a great. That's. I think this is a learning process for me every time I meet someone like this, because sometimes it's just so surprising that someone still would, deny a simple fact as the climate crisis, because it's not something that is debatable anymore. We clearly see, and we clearly have science, and we know that it is climate change is real. It's happening. I think the way to deal with it, or to deal with such people, is just to be extremely patient, and to tell them what you know, educate them, not get annoyed and like shout back or retaliate back at them, but smile and tell them what you know. And it's very likely they're not going to listen to you, and that's fine, because you might not be able to change that one person, but I think you can still streamline your energy and do a lot more instead of, I mean, rather than getting annoyed and irritated and your energy dissipating everywhere, saying, what is this, no one listens, and like people don't believe, and getting very frustrated with the whole thing. I think you try your best, but if they still don't change, you just let them be, because that's still one person, and there's a whole lot of the world that is willing to listen to your arguments, and not everyone is probably as rigid and as how do you say, stuck up in their heads, because a lot of people that I've spoken to have actually opened their eyes. Well, while there have been a few who've just like ignored the conversation, and during an evening, like there's someone I met at someone's birthday party where this lady was completely like saying that this is all rubbish and blah blah blah. So I tried talking to her, and then for the rest of the evening she just completely ignored me. So every time she saw me, she turned her face and spoke to somebody else. So you'll find people like this. But I think there have also been people who will honestly just like listen to you, and if you can present to them facts, don't just speak. I mean, while passion is important, it's not limited to like, I believe in climate change, which is why you should believe that it's real. But it's more about, I believe because of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Give them the reasons, and I think like, most people will understand and will listen to you. So yeah, it's it's a matter of perspective. So we just take it
You
as
need
it
to
goes.
try, yes. You need to try
Yeah.
and try and try. So, yes, yes, nature is enough capable to heal itself and it cannot take COVID-19 is just a trailer. Yes, actually scientists had warned about a pandemic as a result of the climate change and global warming, and this is it. And if we continue proceeding in this way, then we might uh, at least that should put us into action. The thought that we might be heading towards another pandemic should put us into action.
For sure, with climate change, I mean, with in the Arctic, with the permafrost melting, and we're not even sure of what viruses, what bacteria we're going to unearth, which have been hidden and which have been there for millions of years, but they've been, I mean, they've just not been affecting us because the ground has been frozen. But once they come to life with the
Yes,
warming climate, we don't even know what we're going to be
true.
facing. So I think we should, like, if this is not a wake up call enough, I don't know what else will be at this
Yes,
point.
definitely. Yes, and we have PCO Paloma again. I was talking to Hita today about the similarities that Brazil and India have. As big countries with large areas, horrible destruction of wealth, and a government who does not give proper attention. Yes, I just recently read an article which said that the Brazilian president has, taken this opportunity to open up lands for the agriculture, and that is so sad to know that the government is taking this lockdown opportunity to actually uh, put up come up with these environmental projects. That is very sad to know.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's yeah, it's all about taking action, and I've said that multiple times. I think already in our conversation that we need to walk the talk and not just keep talking. So
What will happen
yeah.
if EIA 2020 bill comes to action? Going to be pathetic.
Well, I'm not. I don't know. I'm not an environment impact assessment expert, but what will happen is clearly like it's not going to be. I mean, it's not a favorable condition. It's not a bill that we'd want to have. So I think we shouldn't wait to see what will happen. I think what we should do is just to make sure what we can do is make sure that it doesn't come into action as much as we can.
Yes, definitely not. It's not a road that should be taken for a country like India.
For sure.
The population needs. How can we work as a team of young conscious activists to take social justice to both of our countries? Again, PCO Paloma.
Um, Again, interesting. I think this is. I think what we can do is just build the momentum and build the capacity of other young people, because there's only. I mean, as an individual, there's this much that I can reach, but if I build capacity of 5 other people, that the reach just multiplies
True.
by 5.
Yes.
So I think what is important is to build capacities, especially of young people, but not necessarily restricted to young people. Um, but definitely build capacity, tell them about the crisis, give them the knowledge to deal with, and like concrete action on what they can do individually, and also empower them to go and talk to other people, young and old, to make changes from their households to their communities to their local level, or maybe even their regional or national level. So just I think what we need to do is just multiply what we're doing and multiply it quick enough, and then also try and engage in policy as much as we can. And while it's difficult both in Brazil and India for young people to engage in policy directly, I think we still need to realize that we just push, and we push as much as we can, and there's no giving up there.
And then we have another question for you. How do you differentiate climate change to climate emergency?
Well, I don't. So, climate change is the science that the climate of the earth is changing because of increased greenhouse gases, and that's because of increased human activity and industrialization. But clearly, the situation now is not just climate change. We're reaching a point where it's going to be a tipping point, a point of no return,
True.
and it is a climate crisis or a climate emergency. And I think we ought to treat it like a crisis now. There's no longer any point of talking about whether climate change is real or not. I think that debate is far gone.
Definitely.
And we just need to realize that it is a crisis. We need, like it is, we're in a state of emergency. We need to deal with it like in a state of emergency.
And one last question, can you elaborate on the deleterious effects of climate change, like some of the things that even common people will be facing, like
Some of the
something-
impacts of climate change?
Yes.
I think it's already impacting all our lives. We've realized that there is, especially this year, we've seen already the last month or two, we've seen unseasonal rainfall, hailstorm in different parts of our country in India. It is unprecedented. We've never had this kind of storms that we've had recently in the northern part of the country. Actually, also in Maharashtra. I mean, to have rains, hail, in Delhi, in Gurgaon, it's not normal. Especially in the month of April, it's not. I mean, this is not what has ever happened. So this is. I mean, I don't know whether this is climate change. It's too soon to say this is because of climate change. But events like this is what we're going to see more and more often. We've seen where we have areas of prolonged having no rainfall. So we've had prolonged drought or prolonged like dry seasons. We're seeing temperatures soaring more and more. So we're seeing that, summers are getting hotter and hotter and hotter, and winters sometimes are either more extreme, that either we have the number of cold days. So the number of cold days are actually shorter. Like for example, if winter lasted for 4 months, it's probably a little less. But there's extreme temperatures. So then temperatures drop a lot more sometimes in winter than it used to. So, these extremes in temperatures, whether it's extreme hot, extreme cold, extreme in weather patterns, too much rainfall in a short span, or no rainfall over a long period of time. I mean, these are impacts of climate change, and we're seeing it today already. And I think we're going to see this more and more, and especially like who is the most vulnerable? It's the people who are economically backward, socially backward, people who don't have the means, people living in high rises, people living in houses, still have a roof over their heads, but people living on the streets, people without houses or people without a steady income, don't have the means to fight, don't have the means to survive these crises. So for example, if a farmer's crops are destroyed, his livelihood is destroyed for a while. There's no way he can, it's very difficult for a farmer to feed his family if his entire livestock or his crop is destroyed. But still, like if there's a hailstorm somewhere else, my life is less impacted than the farmer's life. So it's different for different people. Again, it's different for different parts of the world. While some countries might not face it as much, there are countries which are island states, or small island states as we call them, which are in the Pacific Ocean or in the Caribbean, surrounded by water on all four sides. And as the temperature rises, ice caps keep melting, glaciers keep melting, the sea levels are rising slowly. And this is a slow onset event, so you're not going to see it from yesterday to today. But this will be seen over a period of years. And it is definitely a matter of life and death when it comes to people living on small island states. And I think it's also definitely a matter of concern for India because we have a huge coastline.
Yes.
And a lot of our economic activity is on the coast. And a few years from now, there have been predictions, there have been simulations, models of how a lot of Bombay is going to be underwater. So where I stay right now, there might not be land. So, I think we need to realize that whether we probably don't see it today, living our lives peacefully, but it's definitely happening in the background and it's getting worse day by day.
The alarm has already started ringing. It's time for us to react. True. Very true. So one last question. Can you please comment on El Nino effect?
Well, El Nino and La Nina are natural phenomena. They happen naturally and that already has an effect on local weather and climate. But I think with warming of seas, with warming of ocean temperatures, it is creating a change in this natural phenomena. So what usually happened over a period of 3 or 4 years is changing. They're either becoming more stronger or the La Nina effect is becoming weaker. So it is, and all of this played an effect on the seas, the weather patterns in the areas where the El Nino effect was there or is there. So it affects the fisheries, it affects the lives of people who depended on fisheries, it affects the economy of the area, it also affects the weather patterns. So people who had rainfalls at a certain time of the year, that is changing because of a change or a shift in the patterns of the El Nino and the La Nina. So all of this is interrelated, and you know, it's not one thing versus the other. It's just how we put all of it together that matters.
I would like to end this live session by thanking you. Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to have a discussion, have such a productive discussion, enlightening us with your knowledge, with the knowledge that you have, and some of the experiences you've had. About the conferences talk about climate change, and it was such a good session. We all came to know we all must have uh, you know uh, we must have all come to know a new thing about climate change, be it anything in the aspect of climate change that we might not have noticed before. Thank you so much. I feel so honored and proud to have had such a discussion with you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. No, thank you, Pavitra. The honor is mine. Thank you for having me here.
And thank
Thank
you
you.
viewers also for turning up in huge numbers and listening to her and enlightening yourself with such informative information and
Thank you.
yes,
I think it was a great discussion, and I think there were some interesting questions that came up from the viewers. So thank
yes,
you so much for
definitely,
being so engaging,
yes,
and
definitely.
thank you, Pavitra.
Thank you, Rita. Thank you, Rita. Thank you so much. So keep yourself updated on the Naturalist account because tomorrow we're going to be having another live session with Rohit Chakravarti. So yes, thank you so much and have a good night.